Welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is hosted by Asher Agency, a comprehensive marketing partner for clients across the country. For more information, visit asheragency.com.
My guest is Mandy Barth. Mandy, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, and it's been a while since you and I have last talked. I believe it was a couple of years ago that I was a speaker at an IEC event in Indianapolis. It was a great experience. I think I mentioned this to you at the time, but a long time ago, I worked for Northeastern RMC, and I still occasionally bump into some of the folks I used to work with. Obviously, it's been long enough ago that there are some new faces at Northeastern, and also made some new friends. Really had a great time at that event, so I appreciate you thinking of me and inviting me to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that was a great meeting of our communicators.
Right. Well, excellent. Well, we're going to learn more about the IEC in just a few minutes, but I want to start by talking about your career path. And you've taken some interesting twists and turns over the year, but your story starts in Illinois, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
It does. Yeah. I grew up in East Central Illinois in a very small farming community outside of Champaign. I had 36 people in my graduating class. So when I tell you it was small, it was small.
Wow.
Some have heard my high school mascot is notorious. We were the Fisher Bunnies. Yes.
The Fisher Bunnies.
We were. Mm-hmm.
Wow. What does that mean?
So the lore is that back in the 40s or 50s, there was a basketball team that was in a tournament doing really well, and they actually wore rabbit's feet on their uniforms as a good luck charm. And one of the reporters who was covering that tournament called them the Bunny Boys.
Wow.
And it stuck. So It's a pretty ferocious looking mascot, but yeah, so we were the Fisher Bunnies. But I grew up in this small community and went to Illinois State University, got a degree in public relations, moved back to the community after I graduated, and started working for the Champaign Park District in Champaign, Illinois. Worked there for about 4 years and learned a lot. In an organization like that, it's a public agency, but also nonprofit. And in an agency like that, you have to be willing to do a lot with a whole little, without much stuff, without much money. So you learn to do a whole lot of different things. And I got to the point in my career where I was looking for growth and started looking for further opportunities in the community, and was the finalist a couple times for some jobs, and but didn't get them. Mm-hmm. And so I just approached the hiring managers and said, hey, would you mind telling me the person that you hired, what did they have that I didn't, so I can know how I can improve myself in the future? And I did this twice. And both times they told me, well, they had a master's degree. Mm-hmm. Well, in a community like Champaign-Urbana, with a Big Ten university, it's a very overeducated population where you have a lot of trailing spouses who will pick up a master's degree when a spouse is there getting a PhD or another advanced degree. Yeah. And so there were a lot of people that had master's degrees in their hip pockets.
Interesting. Yeah.
One day that I'm like, fine, if that's what you want, I can go get one of those too.
Yeah.
So, I was in my mid 20s and not married and not dating anybody at that time. And I went back to Illinois State, which was about an hour away from where I lived at the time, in an age when research online was not a thing. So I drove back and forth once a week for class at night. It was kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid pretty slowly, but it took me 4 years, and I got a master's degree in communication, but with an emphasis in public relations.
Well, I really love that you asked the question, because a lot of us, if you don't get a job, you just kind of suffer in silence and you make up reasons why it didn't happen. And I'll tell you, I had a very similar experience. I was an English major, and I graduated with a bachelor's in English. And I was like, here I am, world. I have a bachelor's degree. You must need me now. And the world said, maybe not. And one of the things I learned is you have to do something to differentiate yourself. And a master's degree was exactly the same thing that I did. So I applaud you for doing that. I also want to circle back to Fisher Bunnies. It's just now dawning on me that the town must have been named Fishers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or
Yes,
Fisher?
Fisher.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
I was thinking they were bunnies that went fishing, but now it all
Oh,
makes
no.
sense. Okay. So
Yeah.
let's so you earn a master's degree, and
Mhm.
now you're like, okay, world, I've done what you've asked me to do. And then what happens next?
Well, I actually, in the middle of getting the master's degree, I was able to get a new position. And I went to work for the Champaign County Chamber of Commerce, which, again, by the name, Countywide Chamber of Commerce, and really had an opportunity to meet a whole lot of different people. I was dealing with a different population, a different audience in that environment. And in this role, I was meeting the business community. But I want to circle back to my job at the park district.
Yeah.
My first supervisor there, she left while I was there to go back and get her master's degree herself. And when she left, she really encouraged me and said, you need to get out in the community and meet more people. Beyond who you meet with your day-to-day job, you need to get out and volunteer and find organizations that you're passionate about and get out and volunteer. So I really credit her. Shout out to Amy Hurd.
That's great
really
advice.
Get out and the other piece of advice she gave me when she left, and I remember it to this day, she gave me a little book, the Don't Sweat the Small Things book. And in the front, she wrote an inscription that said, these are the 10 most important two-letter words in the world. If it is to be, it is. If it is to be, it is up to me. Meaning, take the initiative, go get it. Go, if you want something, go tackle it.
Yeah.
And so in the midst of working on my master's degree, I was able to shift jobs and went to work for the chamber, again, where I was meeting a whole lot of different people, learning new skills, and just doing different things. So it was a great transition for me. It was also a great opportunity to meet more people, serve in a different way. Also a nonprofit, in a public realm, but a little bit different area. And I enjoyed that and learned a lot from that. I also met my husband while I was working there, and we got married while we were working there. So
nice little bonus, yeah.
It was, yeah. So then, again, I was looking for growth opportunities, and the growth mindset has always been something that I have embraced, of how can I continue to grow and learn new things and do new things. And that's when an opportunity presented itself at the University of Illinois at the College of Veterinary Medicine. The university is the economic engine of Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. And I was a little intimidated by the thought of going to work for such a large employer. I had always worked for a smaller employer and coming from a small town. So I'm not going to lie, I was intimidated about going to work for such a large institution. But in that environment, you're working for your college, or you're working for your department. And I worked for the College of Veterinary Medicine. And again, a nonprofit, but in a little bit different area. Another public institution, though, as well. And learned a whole lot of different things that my public relations degrees did not prepare me for. My first week on the job, my boss, he was a veterinary parasitologist, and which means he deals with bugs, things like tapeworms and fleas and ticks. And first week on the job, he comes in and he sets a gallon-sized jar filled with formaldehyde and a dog heart on my desk. And he said, "You're going to need this next week." I said, "What is that?" It was a dog heart that had been infected with heartworms. And you could see the heartworms coming out of it. So those are the kinds of things that, I learned a whole lot about things that I just didn't even, were not in my realm of vocabulary.
Wow.
So and through that, with every profession, especially in a communication field, you're going to have to learn the industry that you're working in. It's, not every every industry has something different that you have to learn. At the park district, it was one thing. At the chamber, it was more of a business environment. In this world, it was about animal health. And you had to learn about those different types of things. So
Yeah.
Also a fantastic place to work. The people there, crazy smart people doing world-changing things.
Yeah.
It was just a really inspiring place to work.
Yeah.
But while we were there, or while I worked there, this is not something you will see on my resume or my LinkedIn profile. The university was amazing to work with in this. So during that time frame, my husband was given the opportunity with his employer to move to the Tampa Bay area of Florida and take on a promotion for him. We knew at the time it was probably going to be temporary, probably for maybe 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And so I approached leadership at the college, and I said, we also had a daughter at this time too. Our first daughter was born. She was not quite a year old yet. Okay. And I said, I love my job here, but I have to keep my family under one roof. Yep. My husband is moving to Florida.
Yep.
And I'd really like to continue working here. Would you consider allowing me to work remotely as long as I commit to be back on campus a week a month? My parents lived outside of town, and I'll travel on my own dime. That's my commuting dollars. I won't pay for gas. I'm paying for a plane ticket.
Yeah.
And this was in 2008 when remote work was not really well embraced at all.
Yeah. So you're kind of a pioneer in the remote work world.
It was not a day of COVID where, everybody works from home. And so they said, yeah, we'll let you do that. I think that could work. And so I did that for 3.5 years. I worked remotely, and I was on campus for a week a month, just arranged my meetings that I needed to get in person to a really concentrated period of time.
Yeah.
And traveled back and forth. Then we moved back to Illinois. His company transferred him back to the Champaign area. And we've been back in Champaign for about 8 or 9 months. We've been back in Champaign. And then they asked him to move to the Indianapolis area. The corporate headquarters of his employer was here at that time.
Okay.
And so that's what brought us to Indianapolis. And we weren't entirely sure at that time if it was going to be a permanent move. And so for about the first 18 months that we lived here, I actually worked remotely again for the university. So continued to do that. And then when we were here for about a year and a half, I said, all right, it's time. We're going to be staying here. We like this community a lot. We like this area. And I can tell you, as an Illinois gal, I didn't think I would ever choose to live in Indiana. There's still some strong allegiances to the orange and blue in my house. But we really enjoy living here. So I need to set down some roots in the community that we're going to be living in. Our oldest daughter at the time, she was in first grade about this time after we'd been here about a year and a half. I need to set down some roots. So I started looking for a job. And just put out some feelers and ended up here at Indiana Electric Cooperative. So it's been just over 12 years now that I've been here, and I love it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's some great lessons in that. One of the things that resonates with me is that, when you're a parent of young kids, of course, you're going to meet other parents through school activities and other activities. But for better or for worse, a lot of our social life is through work. And when you're working remote, you don't have that outlet. My wife recently, has experienced that. She works for a large global company and she works remotely. And she's actually leaving that job because she's got a good local network, but she wants it to be stronger and more invested in the community we live in. And that's hard to do when your professional connections are, sometimes thousands of miles away. So, what I hear in that is you liked your job, but there was a motivator for a change that was more based in being more integrated into the community you lived in.
Correct. Yeah. I felt like I needed to be here. I needed to be present for my family more, and I needed to be invested in the community that I was living in.
Yeah. Well, and another thing I wanted to ask you is, while there's been a lot of different facets to your career, there's some through lines in nonprofit and membership organizations and advocacy organizations. But it seems like you knew pretty early on that communication was your thing. When did you discover that? When did you know where you were going to kind of set your sails?
Much to my mother's chagrin, it was not until the end of my sophomore year of college.
Okay.
So I said I went to Illinois State, and that was kind of a big deal in the community that I lived in. To go away to a 4-year college, I was the first member of it sounds very cliche, but I was the first member of my extended family to get a 4-year degree. So I left home, only an hour away, but I left home, went to school, and I was a business major. Mm-hmm. And a lot of communication people will tell you this, and I didn't understand how much math I needed to do to be a business major. And I said, this is not for me. Yeah. So after the first semester, I changed my major to English. And the first English lit class I had these 2 really thick books, and the tests were over all of this reading you had to do, and you had to cite a specific passage and what this... No, that was not for me either. So I kept trying a couple of different things until I had an advisor one day say, why don't you try this PR class, this PR 101 class, go take it. And part of it for me too is I was in some lecture halls that had more people in them than I had in my hometown. Wow. Okay. So that was an adjustment for me. But I took this PR class, and I vividly remember coming home from that first PR class, and I called my mom and I said, I found it, Mom. I'm good. But she had told me not long before that, she said, you either figure out what you're doing or you're moving home and going to community college until you figure this out. So, it was that first PR class. And that did it.
Well, and I feel you on the English major. My master's degree in English cured me of any interest in reading fiction ever again. I still read, but it's almost exclusively nonfiction at this point. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think it's interesting to me because so many guests on the podcast, they have a college major that's completely unrelated to what they're doing. So you're one of the few that, has consistently kept that interest. So let's talk a little bit about IEC. And, when you've been doing that work for 12 years, it's second nature to you. But for someone who might not understand what Indiana Electric Cooperatives is, how would you describe it?
So we are the trade association that represents the not-for-profit electric cooperatives that serve the state of Indiana. In Indiana, there are 3 different kinds of electric utilities. You're going to have your investor-owned utilities. That's going to be like Duke, NIPSCO, Citizens, those kinds of agencies. They are owned by their shareholders, and they are required to make a profit so they can pay back the shareholders a dividend. You also have your municipal utilities that serve the communities that own them. So in this area, for example, the town of Lebanon has its own municipal utility, and they provide power to the people who live in their service territory. And then the third provider is an electric cooperative. The co-ops were formed in the United States back in the 1930s when much of the rural area of America was not electrified. And it was because it just didn't make financial sense for the investor owns and the municipals to extend their infrastructure out into the most rural areas of the country. It didn't make sense for them to build 2 miles of line to reach one home to be able to give that home power. So that's when a lot of the farmers, a lot of the people who lived in those rural areas at the time, again, kind of banded together and used that "if it is to be, it is up to me" mantra, and form the electric cooperative using the cooperative business model, which is a not-for-profit business model in that the people who receive the service from the co-op are the owners of that co-op. So they form these co-ops across the state. Actually, our organization was first formed back in 1935 for the purpose of establishing the co-ops that would serve the most rural parts of Indiana. And over time, we have transitioned to be a service organization that we offer services that it makes most sense for us to do here centrally than it does for each co-op to do individually. both economic and time wise.
Yeah. Well, and there's probably some of our younger listeners whose minds are blown at the fact that there were parts of the U.S. less than 100 years ago that didn't have, reliable electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are still parts of the world that don't have electricity, but
Sure.
we're at a point now where everybody remembers being able to flip the switch and always have electricity. We expect that when we turn the light switch on, we're going to have electricity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, it's one of the things that we used to talk about at Northeastern, that when we do our job, nobody notices. But when the lights go off, everybody notices that we exist. So, Mandy, what does your work specifically consist of? What does your team look like, and how do you spend most of your time at IEC?
Let's take a moment to talk about something that can revolutionize your business: branding with Asher Agency. Ever wonder why some companies just stick in your mind? That's the power of great branding, and it's exactly what Asher delivers. Visit AsherAgency.com for more info.
Yeah. So I have a team, a total, including myself, I have a total team of 7. We have 3.5 individuals, and it sounds interesting, but 3.5 people. We didn't actually split her in half, but who are on what I'm going to call magazine dollars. So where their salaries come from is related to a magazine that we publish. We do a statewide magazine that it goes to around 300,000 homes every month. 28 of our co-ops choose to subscribe to that. So we produce a basic issue of this magazine. We have 4 pages that are set aside in that magazine every month for local content. So, for example, I'm going to go back to Lebanon again. Locally, we have Boone Power is their name, and they subscribe to the magazine to send to their members, their consumers. And they get 4 pages in that magazine to put local content. It could be a letter from the CEO, something about a rebate, whatever. But that team, they edit everything that goes into it. They curate the content, edit everything that goes into it, completely lay it out. Take those pages for those 28 local co-ops and lay that stuff out. And we mail out 29 different versions of that magazine every month yeah. So those 3.5 are kept kind of busy.
Yeah.
The other 3.5 in our team are on dues dollars. So we have membership dues that comes into our association. And they so I happen to fall into that category. I have a communication manager and then a graphic designer, and then that other half of that graphic designer that was not on the dollars there. On that side, we offer services to our member co-ops that help them out. We do association-wide communication, so we help with things internally like advocacy communication and things like that. We've come out of the Indiana legislative session, so we helped our government relations folks on things. We help with education, those kinds of other departments in the association. But then the big chunk is helping our members. So we offer, for example, we do a monthly safety education piece, electrical safety education piece that includes written content and some graphics to help communicate a topic. A great one in the spring that we talk about is farm planting safety. You're in the field, you're using planters with long arms, you have the opportunity to come in contact with lines, how to pay attention to that, what you should do or shouldn't do if your equipment comes in contact with power lines to save your life, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. So it's small projects like that. Or if something pops up, not long ago, the state of Indiana, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission announced that they were going to be doing an investigative inquiry into the investor-owned utilities that we just talked about.
Yeah.
So we're expecting that this summer to generate some attention to things related to rates and things like that with the electric co-ops. So helping them be able to communicate the difference, how rates are established for the electric cooperatives, how decisions are made locally, those kinds of things. So it just depends on the time of day. We have routine things that we do, but it's also a lot of, hey, today we're talking about this type of situation.
And it's a difference I think many people don't fully understand unless they're a member of a co-op. It's a board of directors that's local. It's a board of directors who themselves are member owners. So
Correct.
local control at a time in the world when that's kind of hard to come by. So huge advantage there.
Correct.
Yeah.
It is. It's a great model though too. Your neighbors are making decisions about your electric utility, and if you don't like the decisions that are being made, you have an opportunity to voice those concerns. You might know the director and can go talk to them personally, or there's an election every year where a few directors are up for election. If you want to be involved, you can run for your board if you are a consumer and get electricity from that electric co-op.
Yeah. Well, Mandy, what are some of the challenges as you look ahead? Maybe it's something you're excited about. Maybe it's keeping you up at night. Maybe it's, more of a challenge than exciting. What are some of the big rocks you're trying to move forward over the next 3 to 6 months?
So, we're always working on things legislatively, the things that would impact affordability for our consumers. In a not-for-profit world, we feel every regulatory piece that comes our way. The cost to produce power grows at a rate that is unprecedented right now, and trying to help our co-ops balance those things, keep our costs low because it impacts them too, and helping them communicate that to the average consumer when they're hearing things in the news about high electric bills and how that impacts them. And people don't often realize that a co-op, like you talked about, is a not-for-profit. Mm-hmm. So those are the kinds of things that we try to make sure that we're communicating about. Data centers are huge right now.
So, Mandy, as you look ahead, some of the immediate priorities that you're focused on, what's at the top of your to-do list?
There are things related to rates that are always going to be a topic of conversation for us. There's a lot in the news right now related to rates, specifically with the investor-owned utilities that have to produce a profit for their shareholders. Making sure that we're communicating about how the electric cooperatives are different when people don't always know that. And it's hard for them to understand that not-for-profit business model is coming into play for us. There's a lot of talk across the state right now and across the country about data centers and how that will play into it. As an electric utility, we have an obligation with the state to serve those things that live in our electric service territories. So finding a way to balance those things, making sure that the power supply is there, and making sure that we're effectively communicating that with consumers, with our members. Those are some really big things that are out there that are big communication challenges.
Sounds like plenty to work on. And one thing with the data centers is my understanding is they're disproportionately landing in rural communities because of available land and land cost. So something I'm sure you'll be working on for quite some time ahead.
Yeah, I don't see that one going away for a while.
Yeah, probably not. You might wish that it does, but maybe that'll keep you even busier. So, Mandy, I want to pivot to a few more quick hit questions to bring together some of the things we've talked about. What's your best career advice? You've worked in different fields. You've worked with a wide variety of people. What would you say you've learned that's most important for people to hear about having a fulfilling and successful career?
Take the opportunities that show up in front of you. Say yes when you might want to say no. An opportunity might present itself as a threat sometime, but find a way to dig through that and find ways to say yes to things or to get to the other side of what you might view to be a challenge. Being willing to put in the hard work to get there is, I think, sometimes a lost art these days. I sound old when I say that, but it.
Well, it resonated with me, which tells you something about me. So, yeah.
Yeah. But, being willing to put in the hard work and to get to learn, because there's something to be said about the years of experience that go and coming with that. Things hit you differently the older you get and the more experience you have.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. For sure. And I think that idea of being willing to try things, even if it wasn't your intended path, that's where a lot of the growth happens, a lot of the good stuff happens. All right. Second quick hit question has to do with the work that you do or the organization you work for. What is a myth or misconception, something that maybe people don't quite get right that you want to clear up? Or maybe it's something that people don't appreciate quite enough that you want to amplify?
that's a great question. In this industry, in the electric utility industry, the energy industry as a whole, it's great to work in the not-for-profit sector of this world, but sometimes that piece of it gets overlooked and it's misunderstood, because the ones that get the headlines are the ones that are making all the profits and have the big bills and all of that. So the stuff that we do is more behind the scenes, a little bit more humble in that aspect. And so finding ways to communicate about those good things that we do, the ability to serve our communities, and actually, I would really be remiss if I didn't even bring this up on this podcast. We have a fantastic thing that we do here that the co-ops in Indiana do. It's called Project Indiana. And it's our international electrification arm. We started a nonprofit organization back in 2017. And we first went in 2012, but we go to Guatemala every other year and we electrify communities that have never had electricity before.
Wow.
So it's incredible work. We are changing lives. We have been able to help affect change to Guatemalan energy policy and being able to expand those communities and electrify communities that have never had electricity before. It is life-changing work. That's not something that we talk about enough, and not something that a whole lot of people know about.
Yeah, well, that's pretty amazing. And I think it's reflective of what co-ops do really well is they're committed to their communities. And yes, the focus is on power, but there's other things they do, I think, sometimes that are underappreciated. I remember hearing about co-ops that are bringing internet access to their communities, really being innovative in a way that ultimately is about making their communities better places to live. And it's great to hear that they're doing that around the world too, and bringing some of that expertise to countries that really need it. And good to hear some good news, right? A lot of times we think that our country is kind of deluged with bad news, but our people do some great things in other parts of the world. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, it's an incredible project that I'm just humbled and honored to be a part of. I really am.
All right, I've got just one more question for you. And this has to do with the work we do as marketers and communicators. What is a tool, a trick, a tip, a hack, could be anything that you use that helps you be more efficient and more effective? And I'm especially interested, someone who works in the nonprofit world, because you obviously have to do more with less all the time. So what's your secret, Mandy? What do you use that helps you get the job done?
I've thought a lot about this one. I'm like, man, what do I do? I have not been a great adopter of using AI, ChatGPT type stuff. That comes back to you got to put in the work type of attitude that I have to approaching the things that I'm doing, or really feeling like I'm putting my best work into it. I feel like I have in the past felt like that's almost like cheating, but lately I have started to embrace it as an opportunity for me to kind of prime the pump a little bit. If I'm stuck in a writing assignment or something I need to write, or I'm really stuck on a headline, or, hey, here's what I want to say, but I am just not getting my point across, I might use it to help me get to where I need to be. I always revise it, don't use it verbatim, but I'm kind of starting to like it a little bit. I don't know that I use it every day. But and it comes back to, again, being willing to put in the hard work where you can and where you need to, but using the tools at your disposal. Well,
and I share your reluctance, because it does seem sometimes like cheating, but it's the reality. And I'll share something that's helped me. Once I committed to I need to learn this not only for myself, but for the clients I work with. I have an hour every week on my calendar that's non-negotiable for learning more about AI. And an hour a week is not a lot. Sometimes I'll do more than that when time permits, but you have to still do the rest of your job. But even an hour a week compounds over time. I've been doing this now for about a year. So that's 52 hours of learning, which, is pretty great. And I'll tell you, I've been lucky for the last, 20 years. I've worked in the same job and I've always been happy in my work, but it's given it kind of a new energy. It's a new challenge, which I don't get a lot of those, having worked doing the same job for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's helpful to you or anyone listening, but just dedicating an hour every week. If you do an hour once, it's probably not going to matter all that much, but put it on your calendar and keep the appointment just as you would anything else.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot lately with us serving our member cooperatives. We are a resource for them. So it's beholden on us to stay up to date on technologies and know what's going on. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately of, okay, how can I improve my own skills in these areas to be able to help them better? And I love that. I love that attitude of just take an hour a week and start chipping away at it. I love it. I think I might borrow that.
All right. Well, that's a great note for us to end on. I've finally said something useful, Mandy, so we're going to close out on that. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your time and appreciate learning more about your story.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, and thank you to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.
Thanks for joining us today. Next time, we'll be featuring another great guest, so be sure to tune in. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our show and leave us a review. It really helps others find us. Visit our website at asheragency.com for more resources and updates.